All right, here we go, everybody. This is Stephen Ramsden coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. We got a very special event this evening. We're going to have a Team Celestron lunar blowout, baby. We're gonna show you some exciting lunar features and have someone who actually knows what they're talking about describe these features. This is a Team Celestron joint broadcast between team members me, Stephen Ramsden, director of the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project in Atlanta, and Robert Reeves, the world's most well-known lunar imager from San Antonio, Texas, if I'm correct. I could be wrong on that, but I think I'm correct. So what we're going to do is use this incredible, wow, that is an awesome scope, C14 EDGE HD Celestron. It is just an incredible scope. I'm using it at native 4,000 millimeter focal length. The views are incredible. It's really unbelievable, and you'll see that in just a moment. And that's all we're using, just that and a regular old mount you can buy to support that scope, which would have to be a slightly big one. And we're using a Celestron camera and some very simple software. I like to start out with saying that anybody watching this program can get images exactly like mine of the sun or the moon, images exactly like Robert's of the moon or anything else he's photographing. There's nothing to it. It's just pressing buttons and getting the right equipment. Celestron is the place to start. Okay, they've got a great website. You can buy complete setups from $300 on up to $10,000 if you want to get really sissy about it. So we're using just an off-the-shelf Celestron scope, and we're going to check out some lunar features and have Robert Reeves navigate it for us. So here's Robert to say hello. And Robert, how's it going over there in Texas, man? What's the deal?
Well, tonight we've got a real clear night. It's looking lovely here too, and uh, just looking forward to cruising on the moon. It's a fun place to visit, and I'm anxious to show people around.
Robert's got some fantastically cool lunar posters that he's formulating now too, and I'm really going to try to talk him into letting me or letting somebody pay to get these things mass produced because they're just incredible posters. And Robert is a humble guy who you'd never suspect he had so much knowledge about the moon. So we're going to try to squeeze some of that out of him tonight and have a good time. So let me switch over to the telescope view,
Yep, got one right
and
here.
hey, there it is. Show us again and tell us about that, Robert.
This particular one is about the eight largest craters on the near side of the moon, and I talk a little bit about them in descending order from the biggest to the smallest that we can see on this side of the moon. There's larger ones on the far side, but I've had a lot of fun producing these things. I've done 14 of them so far. I figure there's probably about four or five more that I can think up, but each describes a particular set of features on the moon, uh, different geology on the moon, what to look for. So hopefully, when I get the whole series done, people can pick and choose the ones they like to help them understand their favorite features on the moon.
I think they're absolutely incredible. I love them. I've read them all on Facebook. Is there a website where these might become available, or do you have a website for everything you do, Robert?
I have a website, but it's terribly out of date. And once I get these posters done, I'm going to revamp it completely to get it back online. So I don't want to steer people to it right now because it's kind of a mess.
Well, what's your Facebook name? That's probably a good place to see your work right now on
Oh
Facebook,
yeah,
right? And
yeah. Every day I try to put up a new moon picture every day, and uh, I'm look up Robert Reeves on Facebook, and there's several of them, but I am the one sitting in the space shuttle pilot seat,
awesome.
so you can pick me out that way.
Great. I hope to see those lunar posters in every classroom in America in the next year. And let's try to make that happen because they are fantastic. They're original, they're beautiful, and you have a unique way of telling stories about lunar features. So, again,
Well,
we're going
thank
to
you.
get this Team Celestron broadcast going using all off the shelf Celestron gear. There's nothing to it. Anybody here can do this. And we want to introduce you to the awesome world of lunar observing. So here we go. And Robert, I'm going to let you take it away here in just a moment. Go ahead.
Alrighty. Ah, there we go. Now we're looking at the southern portion of the moon, what we call the southern highlands.
Okay, hang on just a second. I've got to teach you something real quick. Can you tap present to everyone? Because what it's doing is changing over to you when you're talking.
Uh-oh. Where do I find that control?
Over on the upper left, there should be a green arrow,
Yes.
I think. Click that and see if you can present to everyone.
Um, I
Let me
see
see
full
here if I can do
screen,
this. Hang on just a minute. Let me
inbox.
see if this works.
Huh. Okay.
All right, try to start talking.
Hello. Can you hear me
That's
now?
good. There you go.
All
Sorry about
right.
that.
Well, now I'm trying to get rid of the little overlay that's on my screen. Okay. Well,
This is
we'll
what
just
what
leave
it's
it
like
like
when you
that.
get two old guys trying to do computers.
Yeah, yeah. Considering the computers were just a science fiction dream when I was a kid. Anyway, got a real nice view of the Southern Highlands here. This is one of the regions of the moon that kind of preserves what the entire moon was like about 4 billion years ago, before the massive impacts that created the basins that eventually evolved into the dark maria that we see as the face of the man in the moon when we look up at the full moon. So we're looking at some of the oldest portions of the moon right now. And just above center, uh, we see the crater Tycho. And we're talking about one of the oldest portions of the moon, yet here we are looking at the crater Tycho, one of the youngest large craters on the moon. Tycho formed only, and I say only, 108 million years ago, back during the era of the dinosaurs. So it's one of the youngest large craters on the moon, because the vast majority of the ones we're looking at right now are closer to 4 billion years old, like Clavius, directly below Tycho, the largest crater below Tycho, the ring plane. You can see the arc of four small craters within Clavius. Um, Indeed, almost 4 billion years old. Uh, Clavius is the third largest crater on the near side of the moon. It spans something like 225 kilometers. It's huge. You could take the largest metropolitan area on Earth, plop it down inside of Clavius, and it would swallow it up. Uh, Looking
Robert,
back,
I've always wondered what the central peaks in these craters were, and also part two is there any reason why there's so many mountainous regions on the limb of the south of the moon, or is it just coincidence, or is there some reason for it, or does it just look that way because of the way we're seeing it?
okay, I'll address the central peaks first. Looking at Tycho, just above center, uh, you see that little mountainous peak right square in the middle. Basically, what that is when a asteroid strikes the moon at cosmic velocities, traveling many many miles per second, the impact force is so great. Whoops. Okay, now we got Tycho off to the extreme right now, and it just drifted out of the field of view. Make it go to the left a little. Oh, there we are. There we are. Tycho near the center again. Um, these cosmic impacts, asteroids striking the moon, with such force, nuclear force, uh, that the rock, the bedrock on the moon, responds in an almost liquid fashion. We've all seen the uh, the films in our high school science class where they're dropping drops of milk um, into a saucer of milk in slow motion, and you see this splash rise up and this peak uh, bounce back up in the middle.
So
That's
it's almost like
essentially
it's frozen from the explosion. So the little
right.
milk splash in
Right.
the center.
The milk splash in the center is frozen, except this is on a scale. Well, Tycho is like 55 miles across, so this is a
Wow.
huge scale, and the rock responds in an almost fluid fashion, and the rebound from the impact pushes up these central peaks. And
Wow.
central peaks only happen in craters that are larger than 10 miles in diameter. If the crater is smaller than 10 miles in diameter, the dynamics are not enough to create a central peak.
I did
But
not know that.
almost all of the large craters have central peaks, or did at one time. Clavius even had one, but subsequent nearby impacts threw other debris into the center of Clavius. That's why it's so smooth.
Oh, oh,
And its central peak has been buried for millions of years, billions of years even.
goodness. And how about the mountain peaks?
Along the edge of the terminator, well, basically we're looking at crater rims, just breaking into the sunrise. The actual mountain ranges on the moon follow the rims of the giant basins that the lunar mare, the dark regions, lay in. And when we go northward here shortly, we'll run into some of these mountain ranges.
Well, I got
But
to ask you, this crater below Clavius, the one that has the five crater. I mean, it looks like somebody graphically designed that with a spiral of ever increasing sizes of craters. Do you see where my mouse is right now?
oh yeah,
What is that? That's so beautiful.
yeah, you're on Clavius right now.
Oh,
Yeah, that's that 225-kilometer wide crater, and the arc of craters within it. It's just a chance, random series of impacts, but nature provided us a very
wow.
interesting little progression, going from small on the left to progressively bigger and bigger and bigger, and then finally down at the bottom on the rim of
Goodness.
Clavius. That one is actually large enough to have a central peak.
Ah, see, the whole time, that's how little I know about the moon, and that's why I invited a professional online with us because I thought you were talking about the one above it with the central peak. But anyway,
Oh well, I was at one point. We're drifting around here.
I am such a
But
daytime astronomer. Um, by
well,
the
if
way,
you
we
want,
are looking at reflections of sunlight for those of us that are solar astronomers.
oh yes, the moon is entirely lit up by the sun.
So, what
And
do you want to do next?
over here on the Terminator, uh, well, in the upper left-hand corner, notice the peanut-shaped crater.
I do.
Yeah, you're kind of drifting it a little bit closer to the
There we
middle
go.
now.
That
Yeah,
one.
that's Haensel. It's actually two round craters that are merged, but our
All right.
slight viewing angle from the Earth, close to the limb of the moon, uh, kind of compresses it into a peanut shape. So not all craters on the moon are round.
Hmm.
Then directly below it, right along the terminator, you see the long, brightly lit rim
I do.
of another crater. That's Shiller. Shiller is 3 times longer than it is wide. Right now, it's almost entirely filled with shadow, but we can see the sunrise just coming up on the western rim of it. And you can get the idea that this thing is actually quite long and very narrow. Uh, Schiller is almost cigar shaped.
So, if we had a base there, we would be seeing the sun just kissing the tip of the crater rim from inside the crater right now. It'd be beautiful, I
That
bet.
that's right. It would be brightly illuminating the peak of the rim, and some of that sunlight would be reflecting and spilling back down inside the middle of the crater very
Awesome.
dimly.
And I feel like maybe I can see a little bit of a tip of a central peak right here, or not. Or is that the
No,
rim of another crater?
that's the rim of another crater. The central peak of Schiller is actually a long ridge, which is in the shadow of the left-hand side of the crater at the moment. It's very unusual. It's not a central peak. It's a central mountain range.
Oh,
Schiller is a strange little crater. If you want
wow.
to drift a little bit north or move the image upward,
Okay.
okay, along the terminator here, you can stop right now.
Okay.
We're seeing the up at the top, the crater Gassendi just beginning to come into.
This one?
Yep,
Okay.
and
I want to
uh,
make sure.
yeah, yeah, make sure we're on the same page here. But the uh, circular mare just below Gassendi is
Mm.
uh, what we call mare humorum, the sea of humidity, and
Mm.
Gassendi is what we call a floor fractured crater. Right now, it's not illuminated well enough, but in another couple of hours, more sunlight will spill into the center uh, of Gassendi, and you'll see this massive series of cracks and rills running across the crater floor. That's what
Fantastic.
we call a floor fractured crater.
And what are
Uh,
these beautiful lines inside this Mare Humera, you said?
Humorum.
Humara.
You see the ridges; those are called wrinkle ridges,
Oh,
and those appear in almost all of the Maria. And what that is when the lava flows filled up these massive basins and created the Maria, uh, the weight of the lava fill slumped toward the center of the Maria.
I see.
And as it slumped, it piled up and buckled itself up, kind of like hot asphalt on a hot paved road will buckle up in the summertime and create cracks and
Mm,
rumples in the asphalt. Uh, a similar situation here on the moon, where the uh, lavas were slumping together, the basalts were slumping together and buckling up, and they create these ridges.
fantastic.
I want to drift a little bit further up. We'll see what other things we can explore here.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be. There we are. Copernicus coming into view now. Bring it down a little bit more and kind of center bright Copernicus right there. Now you got it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
now Copernicus is also a relative youngster on the moon. We believe it's somewhere between about 800 million and a billion years old, which on the lunar timescale is fairly young. But it has to be young because we see this fantastic ray system splattered out in all directions.
Hmm.
This is pulverized material thrown out from the crater by the impact that created Copernicus. And ray material generally fades after about a billion years. Solar
That
radiation
quickly,
will,
huh?
yeah,
Only a billion.
a billion, only a billion. Yeah, yeah, kind of like my first birthday, way back then. But solar radiation will darken the material that is thrown out from the crater, and the continuous rain of small micrometeorites eventually erases ray structure. And the fact that we can still see this massive ray structure around Copernicus demonstrates that the crater is not that old. It's still a relative youngster.
So I've
Um,
always loved this feature, and I've always kind of compared it to a pupil in the eye with the retina around it. Just the manner in which the ray material has been dispersed. It looks
yeah,
like so many other shapes that you see in nature.
it's very symmetrical. The ray structure around
All right.
Copernicus
All
kind of
right.
goes in all directions.
And are the
Um,
tips of the crater there, the two central peaks, they're bright white because they're illuminated or tall enough to be illuminated right now?
oh yeah, yeah. They protrude about a kilometer above the crater floor, so they're fully illuminated by the sun now.
What a fantastic, beautiful sight.
I want to drift up a little bit further, and
Sure.
we'll see if we can pick up Sinus Iridum. And here it comes. Go straight up. There we go. That Horseshoe Bay coming into view now.
Ah,
And you can, yeah, right about there, because now we see Plato as well, that dark floored crater off to the right. You know,
that's a
Sinus
beautiful
Iridum,
feature.
uh, if the impact that created Sinus Iridum happened to land a little bit further west, that would be the largest crater on the near side of the moon. It spans almost 400 kilometers,
Goodness.
but it landed right on the rim of the uh, Imbrium Basin. So when the Imbrium Basin filled up with lava between 2 and 3 billion years ago, it spilled over into Sinus Iridum as well,
Ah,
and
okay.
they kind of merged together, and it created a horseshoe bay. Because the crater that made Sinus Iridum, which translates as the Bay of Rainbows, it landed on the edge of the Imbrium Basin, and since the basin is basically saucer shaped, sloped, the inner portion of it toward the middle of the Imbrium Basin is lower. So when the
Mm.
lavas flooded the Imbrium Basin and created Mare Imbrium, it also flooded into Sinus Iridum. So now we see it as this magnificent horseshoe bay.
So, are you saying that perhaps the rim of the crater on the lower right is still there and just covered in lava, or did the
Yes.
lava erase it
Oh
completely?
no, it's still there. It's just buried. And the arc of the horseshoe, the rim of the horseshoe, uh, but we can see the cliff faces of the edge of the crater. Yep, you're following it now. Those are known as the Jura Mountains.
Ah,
So it's
you
one
could
of the
almost see
mountain
a little bit
ranges
of
on
the
the moon.
crater's remnant. Kind of is that what is that
Yeah,
an
a little bit.
illusion?
Yeah, a little bit of a wrinkle ridge there where
Mm.
the submerged crater rim kind of buckled up the basalts, on Mare Imbrium. So sometimes you can see traces of buried mountain ranges by how they affect the smoothness of the Mare lavas
Now, Robert,
or
did
the
somebody
basalts.
did the lava also cover up the nose and the smiley face underneath these two eyeballs?
No, they come along later. Those are the craters Leverrier and Helicon.
Oh,
Leverrier, named after the French astronomer who was instrumental in calculating where Neptune would be found. Uh,
I
they
see.
occurred much later, after the lava flows flooded the interior of this uh, Mare Imbrium. Now, going
Fantastic.
up to the top, or not, no, not the top of Mare Imbrium, I mean,
Oh, I see.
we see the crater Plato, the bright rimmed, dark floored crater. That quickly becomes a favorite of all novice lunar observers because it is so unusual. It's it catches your eye. It's just so out of place that you fall in love with it. Now, immediately to the right of Plato crater, we see a rough area. That is uh, Alps mountains on the moon.
Alps.
They're yeah, the Alps. A lot of lunar mountain ranges are named after terrestrial mountain ranges, and this particular one is known as the Alps. And we see the linear gash
Yeah,
protruding
what is
through
that?
it. That's the Alpine Valley. It's
Oh,
a feature that is geologically known as a graben, and it's
how do you spell that?
basically Graben.
Ah,
I may be mispronouncing it, but graben. But basically, it's a slumping of the land between two parallel faults.
I
So
see.
it created the Alpine Valley, another feature that very quickly becomes a favorite of novice lunar observers.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really cool, man. I had no idea what that was. I just figured it formed geologically at some point, but no, I had no idea why or what they were called. So this is very informative for me too, and I appreciate it. What do we
If you
got going
drift,
on? Go
well,
ahead.
if you drift a little bit down to the lower right, we'll pick up some more
Okay.
lunar mountains.
Okay. Pardon me if this is a little shaky. Uh,
Okay, now there you go, down a little bit and
oops.
stop
Hold on.
right about now.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There you go. How's that?
Yeah, that's good because now we have more lunar mountain ranges. We got the Alps in the upper left that kind of arc down around the shoreline of Mare Imbrium from the crater Plato, and then it intersects the Caucasus Mountains, which we see as the vertical stream of mountain ranges near image center, and then
These. Okay.
yep, and then the Apennine Mountains are curving down toward the lower left.
Ah,
Yep, the cursor is following them. All of these mountain ranges are actually the rim of the Imbrium Basin itself. And
I
when I
see.
say basin, a basin is basically just a monster crater on the moon. Any crater larger than 300 kilometers in diameter is classified as a basin. And this particular one is gosh, I think it's something like 900 kilometers across, uh, filled with lava, and became what we see as Mare Imbrium, the man in the moon's left eye. And there's must be a little bit of wind over there because it's kicking your microphone around,
Sorry about
and
that.
it's
I will mute myself. How about that?
perhaps I should do the same. We just enjoy the view. Um, Now, a curious thing, we're looking at the Alps up at the top, the Caucasus more or less at image center, and the Apennines arcing down to the lower left. Now, look to the left of the Caucasus Mountains, and you'll see three large craters in a roughly triangular pattern. Yep, that's the area. Right in the middle of those three craters, the one on the left is Archimedes, and Autolycus and Aristillus are the two on the right. Right in the middle of that triangle is the impact site of the first man made object to reach the moon in September of 1959. That's the impact site of Luna 2. And when
So
the
you're saying
Russians,
we actually did go to the moon? It's not a hoax.
oh, yeah, yeah, in 1959, we reached the moon. As humanity reached the moon, it was the Russians, at the height of the space race, or it actually helped trigger the space race that prompted Apollo and man to the moon. But the Russians shook things up a little bit. They put up Sputnik, and then 2 years later, they struck the moon with Luna 2 and really turned on our space program.
And
And it was only 10, it was actually less than 10 years later from this first baby step, the first impact on the moon, to when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon.
wow.
This September of 1959 to July of 1969,
And you were
less than
what,
10
about 10 or
years.
12 years old when that happened? Do you remember
Uh,
that?
yeah, I was 13 when Luna 9 hit, and it was big news. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And to make it even more interesting, only 1 month later, the Russians flew Luna 3 behind the moon and photographed the backside of the moon.
Oh boy.
So I've been observing the moon since before we knew what the backside of the moon looked like. It was
And
still
did
a
you have a
mystery.
telescope at that age, Robert?
Oh yes, I had a little Gilbert reflector, and I would look at the moon out through the window of my bedroom and dream like any kid back then.
What was the first thing you looked at when you first got your telescope? And who gave it to you?
Oh, my parents gave it to me for Christmas in 1958, and uh, that was just when the American space program was just beginning to reach for the moon. We were trying to launch the Pioneer probes and failing miserably. None of them
Mm.
made it to the moon until uh, later in 1959. Uh, but the initial ones, it was very inspiring. Even though they were failing, we were actually trying to reach the moon so early in our space program. We barely managed to get a satellite into orbit, and we were already looking for the moon. So
Absolutely.
it's
That's back
very,
when
very,
exploration was everything in this culture. Everyone wanted to be an astronaut when I was a young man.
still wouldn't mind it, but my wife might object to me being gone for so long. Let's see. Well, let's drift a little bit to the right and see what kind of mischief we can get into.
Let me adjust the exposure here when we get
Yeah.
over to the limb.
Okay.
Why is it so much brighter on the limb than?
Well, it's flatly illuminated by the sun. Now, directly overhead, there are no shadows, and as
Ah,
we get over toward the limb, there's progressively more and more shadows. So the amount of reflected sunlight is considerably less. But down in the lower right-hand corner, we see Mare Crisium coming up. This is one of the landlocked moons. Excuse me, a landlocked Mare on the moon. It's not physically connected to the others. uh, Mare Imbrium, Mare Serenitatis, Mare Tranquillitatis, they all merge together at one point. But this particular one, Mare Crisium, completely landlocked. You can see it's at a slant on the limb of the moon, so it looks elliptical, but it's actually almost round.
mm.
Another one of these giant impact basins that filled up with lava about 2, 3 billion years ago and formed part of the face of the man on the moon.
And tell us
Now,
about this thing that always ruins all my images right here that's so bright.
yep, I was just going to mention the crater Proclus, Proclus, Proclus. And that's another fairly new crater on the moon. Uh, you can tell it's new because one, its ray structure is still there, and two, it's incredibly bright. The interior of it is still shattered from the impact, and all the angular blocky material is reflecting sunlight. It hasn't been smoothed down and muted by meteor impacts over many, many billions of years. But notice that Proclus's ray structure is not symmetrical.
No.
It only extends more or less up and down and slightly into Mare Crisium. This is what we call a classic butterfly ray pattern. And what happens here is an extremely oblique impact from a
That's what I
very
thought.
shallow
Yeah.
angle struck, and the dynamics of a impact, a very shallow impact, throws the ray material at 90 degrees from the direction the impactor came from, and there's almost no ray structure back in the direction that the meteor came from, or the asteroid came from.
And that would
So we,
explain the extra crater wall on the north part of that, or not? It
well,
seems like it
it's
might be taller or larger and reflecting more sunlight, or is that just the angle of the sun?
uh, I'm not sure about that, but it's definitely a very fresh and bright area that's reflecting brightly because uh,
You can
the
say that
impact
again.
churned up churned up all the interior, broke up all the rock, and it's very blocky and angular and reflects well. Uh, Once it's billions of years old, meteor impacts begin to dull it and blunt it down and smooth it out, and it doesn't reflect as much.
I see.
Very
Um,
young.
yeah, and it's always much brighter than everything else, so it's really difficult for me to get a well exposed image of this area.
Yeah, Proclus is always going to be bright. There's just no way
Yeah,
around it.
yeah.
Uh,
I notice how
we
smooth the limb is over here too. Do you have any comments on the smoothness versus the poles that seem to be a lot rougher, or
well,
just
we're
coincidence?
oh, we're just looking at an area that doesn't have as much heavy cratering. Uh,
I see.
there are some rumples along the edge of the moon, no matter where you look, but other areas it's distinctly more jagged.
Mm,
So we're just coincidentally in an area that isn't so heavily cratered.
mm. So
It's
there might
fine.
not be any Bailey's beads off that area during a total solar eclipse.
Or there would be fewer of them.
Fewer, yeah.
Yeah, and you're drifting to the left a little bit. Let's go on over and take a look
Oops.
at the, yeah, go to the left a little more, a
Is
little
that left
more.
for you?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's the correct left.
Okay.
Okay, right about now, stop.
Okay.
And we're looking at kind of an irregular, blobby Mare, lunar Mare. This is Mare Tranquillitatis.
Ah,
In the lower left-hand side of it is the Apollo 11 landing site.
in this area here?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Robert, my father took me to the Apollo 11 launch in 1969.
Really?
I don't remember it, but I have a certificate. And maybe I'm romanticizing it or something, but it seemed like everybody was a lot more interested in what was going on with the space program in 1969 than they were in 2017.
Oh, I guarantee you they were. It kind of collapsed quickly after the Apollo program ended. But yeah, I was able to see it, the whole mission live, thank God, because I was in the Navy at the time on an aircraft carrier. And just by
Oh,
coincidence, I was transferred to a shore base for additional nuclear weapons training during the Apollo 11 mission. So I was able to see the whole thing.
wow. Fantastic.
But,
So we're both
well,
Navy vets. I think I already knew that, but
yep.
that's good.
Yeah, I was on the USS America.
Oh,
Let's drift downward a little bit and see what
all
we can
right.
see.
Just a moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll do full circle here and kind of get back to where we started from.
Oops.
Okay, right about there,
Okay.
we're looking at a circular Mare right square in the middle of the field of view. That is Mare Nectaris, and that's one of the smaller of the lunar Mare, but it's one of the more important because it was the first of the great basins on the moon. And as a result, uh, we use that as a benchmark for lunar time. Uh, uh,
Really, explain that again. I
well,
don't know if I understand it.
Earth's ancient history is marked by Precambrian and Cambrian and Jurassic and all those geologic periods of time. Well, the moon has similar periods of geologic time. Um, Everything that happened before the formation of the Imbrian Basin that we're looking, excuse me, the Nectaris Basin that we're looking at right now is pre-Nectarian.
Oh,
Uh, then about 3.9 billion years ago, the Nectaris Basin was formed, and
wow.
for the next 100 million years, we called it the uh, Nectarian epoch.
So it's kind of like the KT boundary on Earth. It's a geological time marker.
Right, and then after that was the uh, Imbrian epoch, and then the Eratosthenian epoch, and then finally the Copernican epoch, which began with the formation of the about the time of the formation of the Copernicus crater about 1 billion years ago.
Mm,
So this Nectarian epoch is very important because that was during the time of the late heavy bombardment when the moon was heavily blasted by a storm of asteroids and the great basins were formed on the moon, which later filled with lava and created the face of the man on the moon.
I see.
So the Nectarian impact marked the beginning of that giant basin forming period that lasted about 100 million years.
Awesome.
And go downward just a little bit. And here we see these two very bright spots right in the center of the field now. Um, those are two very small craters. They're very fresh. Uh, they have a bit of a ray pattern around them, but they're tiny. They're probably about 10 miles in diameter, but they look unusually bright. And we refer to them as the headlights, both of them together.
So would those be very high velocity, small asteroids that struck the surface, you think?
Well, the velocity of the impacts were not much higher than any other impact because we're dealing with lunar gravity or Earth's gravity.
Mm,
Uh, the velocity of asteroids at this particular distance from the sun, but it did strike in the Highlands, and
mm,
there's just a lot of freshly pulverized, crushed uh, rock and ray material thrown out that makes these extremely bright because they're very young. They haven't been faded by the
I
effects
see.
of space weathering, the effects of solar radiation, or the erosion of micrometeorites.
I see.
And if we
This
drift a
is
little bit to the right,
fascinating
we'll kind of
information.
get back to where we started from. We've kind of made a loop around the visible face of the moon this evening because you see the rays of Tycho in the field of view now. You see the
So
streak.
these rays came from.
Yep, they all radiate away from Tycho. You can see the ray pattern splashed all the way across the right-hand side of the view. Uh, the Tychonian ray system spans almost 2,200 kilometers across the face of the moon.
Goodness.
It's the biggest, freshest ray pattern, large crater ray pattern on the moon. So they're going to be around a while. So this kind of brings us back to where we started from, and
I'm still
kind
thinking about the last 8 things you said, trying to absorb everything.
of. Well, I don't want to overdo it, or it'll just be so much that nobody
Holy
absorbs
cow.
anything. But
This is
it's kind of fun to cruise around and visit old friends and reminisce about what happened way back when and how the face of the moon came into being.
wow, I've learned more in this broadcast than I think I've learned in 52 years of being alive about the moon. I've really should have paid more attention. I've always loved it, but there's just so much on it. I've always just been kind of overwhelmed with all the different names and everything. But wow, the way you explain it makes it really a lot more easy to understand. And wow, I'm really
Well,
grateful.
Well, the moon is our buddy up there. I mean, we can see it from our own backyard. We don't need to pack up our telescope and go 100 miles out of town to dark sky.
Yeah.
Light pollution means nothing to the
Yeah,
moon.
as
It's
evidenced
a,
by this broadcast, because I'm in the middle
yeah,
of downtown Atlanta, and I have at least 8 different 200 plus watt LED lights within 100 feet of me,
yeah.
and street lights and large buildings all around me, and we're still getting a fantastic view of the
That's the
moon.
same with my observatory here in San Antonio. I'm fully illuminated by distant street lights, and uh, it doesn't affect the moon at all. So the moon is a target you can play with from your own backyard and explore endless geology on another world. The moon is the
that's
only it's the only
that's pretty
world that
cool.
we can look up with our own telescope and see details a mile in diameter. You can see more on the moon with a pair of binoculars than you can on any other planet with the most powerful telescope. So
Wow.
it's a fun place to play with. We shouldn't ignore it. It's part of our space heritage, and we should give it more of its due.
Now I have to tell you a little. I've known Robert for many years now. He's right up there in the top five of awesome guys. And it took us a while to get our internet broadcast going because we speak different languages. I'm using Macs and he uses PCs. And this is Robert's first internet broadcast, I believe. And
Well,
well,
thank you
he's
for
been on the
guiding me
internet a
through
bunch
it.
of times. What's that? Go ahead.
I said thank you for guiding me through it.
Yeah, well, we had a couple of trials, and then last week when we decided to do it, we sat on here for 40 minutes before the broadcast and just marveled over things and talked about things. And right before the 7:30 start time, 2 minutes before, literally, a bank of clouds came in and blocked us for the rest of the evening. So
Yeah,
it's been a lot of trial and error to get this broadcast going. Robert, if I could ask you a few questions, if you don't mind, do you have a few more minutes, or is
sure.
Mary calling you in there? Okay.
Yeah, we're
Um,
good.
when is the last uh, impact that's been viewed in modern times or even in ancient times on the moon?
Uh, there's You mean seen from Earth or evidence of it detected by
Yeah, has there been one
satellites?
that's been seen in modern times? Has anything hit that we've watched?
Not from Earth in modern times, but back in medieval times, there's a body of evidence that suggests that perhaps some English monks witnessed an impact just beyond the limit of the moon that created a crater that we see uh, in spacecraft views. It's on the far side of the moon, but uh, there's debate about whether or not that's actually the case, but it's compelling to think that it might have happened. That these monks recorded the evidence of an impact on the far side of the moon just by the nature of the description of how they explain the phenomena, and it sounds believable to me. And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
but since then, no, in modern times, in the space age, we haven't had the pleasure of looking up and seeing the bright flash and oh, there's a new crater. Uh,
Do you think that we would even know with current technology? Because I noticed a lot of pretty close flybys have occurred in the last few years that no one even knew about until a couple of days before. Do we have the technology to know that's going to happen?
well, the various sky surveys, like the Catalina Sky Survey, they're picking up these relatively small uh, asteroids, just meters across. And if one of them is targeted for the moon, we will be watching. We will see something. uh, but they're so seldom. They're
Mm,
as many of them as are out there. You would think more action would happen, but things
yeah.
are fairly benign these days.
Well, lucky for us, right? Because it probably allowed life to evolve over those few billion years,
Yeah,
and
well,
had
it would be a bad day if a big one came by, uh, but things like the Chelyabinsk incident a couple of years ago, where that asteroid blew up over Russia. Things like that can happen almost any time. There's no warning for them that are that small, and they sneak up on us.
well,
But if we know a big one's coming and it's headed for the moon, we're certainly going to watch.
so what's coming up next for Robert Reeves? I know you're going to be at NEAF with me this next year, but what's the next big thing for you, Robert?
Oh, the next big thing for me. Oh, I've been invited to speak up in Seattle, Washington in January, and Um, hopefully, I will be at NEAF. I've been in discussions with Tommy over in China, and he's not sure whether I'm going to go over to China to lecture about the moon this April or in 2019. But I hope it doesn't interfere with NEAF because uh, I've got a lot of friends up there I like to visit too.
Right.
Uh,
We're going to get Pranvera up there to join us, hopefully with Team Celestron. That's all in the works, thanks to you. And I'll be at NEAF as well. What kind of, if you had an opportunity to say something about the moon or about the hobby, or even maybe Celestron sponsorship of both of us, what would you like to say about the hobby and maybe the state of it? Or here's your forum,
well,
Robert.
oh, uh, well, what's right off the top of my head? I wouldn't want to leave something out and hurt anybody's feelings, but um, basically, I thought my astronomy days were pretty much over until Celestron took me under their wing a number of years ago, and it's been nothing but a skyrocket ride ever since. With the help of Celestron and Skywatcher as well, their sister company, uh, my lunar observing and my lunar photography has um, it's just surpassed anything I ever thought I could do.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing ride, and I hope that through my 365 days of the moon project, where I put out these pictures every day, that I'm kind of paying back these people who have been so generous in helping me.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same thing about Corey Lee and Kevin Kawhi and the guys over at Celestron. They've just been fantastic sponsors of what we're doing in the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project as well. Um, and 365 days of the moon is something I always look forward to on Facebook and social media because you have to wade through so much garbage these days to find the good stuff. But I want to tell you that we were pretty much one of the first astronomy groups to get on Facebook back in 2007, and the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project kind of helped us pioneer that use of social media, which I'm proud of because we found a positive use for it, and our entire
Mhm.
program is basically ran off Facebook and Instagram. And I've met all of these people, Pranvera in Kosovo, Sofiane in Tunisia, all the people around the world that I've visited and donated equipment to through our donors have all been through social media. So it does have some positive impact on the world, hidden there way beneath all the negative stuff it's doing. And I want to tell you, I'm really, really, really privileged to have had you join me for this because I've always loved your work. And I'm just glad we could work it out. And I hope that the viewers are getting as much out of this as I am because this has been a very, very, very informative time for me. I'm totally humbled by your knowledge, Robert. You're such a quiet guy. I had no idea that you had this much extensive knowledge about the moon.
Well, just don't ask me about the sun.
Well, I'll take care of that part of it if we do a solar broadcast together. I know a little bit about that one. But again, this has been Robert Reeves and Stephen Ramsden from Team Celestron using off the shelf Celestron gear that anybody watching this broadcast can go up and acquire in no time from celestron.com. And you can be taking these images just like me and Robert and doing these live broadcasts in a matter of a few days with the right gear and a little bit of practice. So I want to say thank you very much to Robert Reeves and to Robert Reeves' wife for putting up with this. And the same thing I always thank my wife, Natalie, for putting up with all this mess. And we're going to sign off now after this broadcast. And I hope that it gets viewed by millions of people because it's way better than anything Kim Kardashian's ever put out. Um, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you have a nice evening there in Texas.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Adios, my friend.
Bye bye.